And so bandwidth is one of these odd phrases, but what it really means is you can only concentrate properly on one thing at a time, even if you are the government.
Yeah, and this government
Nigel,
is caught...
So Nigel Farage, it's all your fault.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, most things are, of course. It's very interesting. I mean, every government talks about social mobility. None of them have achieved anything for decades and decades as the gap's got bigger. What is interesting is that Theresa May was one of the very few people in Westminster who genuinely believed that giving grammar school provision to many more people would start to close some of those gaps. In fact, it's one of the very few things that she actually believed in. And what's interesting is...
close the gap.
Oh, no, they certainly do.
They do not.
For bright kids from poor backgrounds...
If you don't get into a grammar school...
It may not solve it for everybody, but it begins to close the gaps. And what I'm surprised by, what I'm very surprised by, is she's given up on that. She's completely dropped the grammar school part of her programme.
Where have we seen the promotion of social mobility or tackling poverty anywhere, from Labour to Conservative? One of my biggest frustrations is, yes, there's this worry of the Brexit black hole, that all of our conversations will be involved in Brexit. But most of the solutions to tackling social mobility lie with Westminster. It has nothing to do with the European Union. We could liberalise housing tomorrow, build more homes, bring costs of rent and housing down. The UK has some of the highest costs of childcare in the OECD. We could tackle those regulations, bring that cost down, get more women back into work. None of this is tackled or discussed on either side. And I think
you have an agenda. Give Theresa May a call when you finish here after breakfast.
I just want to say one thing on that. I think the Labour government, Sure Start was a very, very important measure, which, you know, early intervention in terms of social mobility.
The numbers show that Sure Start did work.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, Sure Start is being cut by this government.
Nigel, can we were talking about Brexit. Let's talk about Brexit.
Why not? Yeah,
it's a really big Sunday Times
double-page spread
here.
here and cartoon and all the rest of it. Eurosceptics demand no more bowing to the EU. It's quite interesting that the government was elected as a pro-Brexit government, yet they find themselves increasingly moving away from mainstream Eurosceptic opinion in this country. For example, agreeing to pay up to 50 billion sterling as a separation bill from the European Union. I mean, that is something supported by only about 10% of the entire population.
Can I ask you about what you think about that? Because a lot of people would say it's a lot of money, even over many, many years, but if we get a really good trade deal as a result of that, it might economically, in the end, be worth it.
I don't think a tariff-free access deal to the European single market is worth 50 billion sterling. Absolutely not. It's way too much money. The problem with all of this is that the EU are being very unreasonable. At every step of this, they appear like bully boys. And to see Donald Tusk in Dublin the other day saying to the Irish, you can veto everything, there's a feeling that we're not dealing with reasonable people. There's also a feeling that we're probably, under Theresa May, at the end of March 2019, going to leave the European Union in name, but still be stuck part of the single market, and goodness knows
can I just
what gets agreed on Ireland.
Because one of the things that you've been very eloquent about is lavish overspending of EU funds. And I noticed that one Nigel Farage is going to get a £76,000
this is very, very important.
pension.
This is very important. There are 22,000 people who either receive or who are in line for EU pensions.
And you're one of them.
But of course, it just happens to be me they're talking about. No mention of Kinnock or Mandelson or anybody. All I can say is, given the arbitrary way the European Union behaves in terms of money, I'd be very surprised if I get any of it.
Well, can I ask you...
Very surprised if I get any of it.
Can I ask you a different question? Can I ask you a different question? This is your moment on live television to say that I will stick by my principles. I, Nigel Farage, would not accept this pension.
Oh, I'm not going to get it anyway, so it won't... I don't think this will even occur.
But if it did, you wouldn't take it?
Oh, of course I would take it. I've said that right from day one. Well, of course.
Okay.
Why should my family and others suffer even more?
This is the sort of hypocrisy that we see.
No. I said it from day one. It is not hypocrisy. I've just voted to get rid of my job. I was the turkey that voted for Christmas. How's that hypocrisy? If it was hypocrisy, I'd have said we should stay in the EU.
You still hoovered up your expenses and your salary from the EU, which you rail against.
Well, at the moment, they've demanded an arbitrary 40,000 from me by Christmas. They're fining me. So, as I say, just look at the way they've treated me. over the years.
But I just want to say one last thing on the Brexit stuff. I mean, all of this just proves that when we voted to leave the EU, and I understand people had good reasons for doing it, it's like a leap of faith in the dark with a blindfold on. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And it now sings the phrase, take back control, was take back control and give it to the Irish. You know, we are in such a mess on Brexit.
That's why
we're going to talk about.
We have to stand up. We have to stand up and have leadership.
Okay, guys,
Brexit's failing. Brexit's failing because of the government, not because we voted to leave.
Enough of that. We're going to move on to the other side of the Atlantic now. Kate, you've got. Is it the New York Times there on the tablet?
It is the New York Times here, which is talking about Michael Flynn, the National Security Advisor, who earlier this year was fired because it turned out that he had more communications with the Russians than he had let the Vice President to believe. Flynn is now cooperating with the FBI and Agent Mueller, who is running the special investigation into Russia. And the New York Times...
He's cut some kind of deal, hasn't he?
Well, most likely. It looks like his cooperation might get him off on some of his other areas in which he might be more guilty. What the New York Times is highlighting is that Flynn might have had more communications with the Trump transition team than Donald Trump himself wanted to let on. It's an important story. Russia is going to continue to be an important story, but this is still not the smoking gun that I think most of Trump's opposition wants to find. And it concerns me that every story like this is used to prove that there was collusion. We still have no evidence that there was collusion. Who knows what will happen? We might find it.
So stay calm on this story. Follow the details. Stay calm.
And if you are actually frustrated with Donald Trump, going after him on Russia, I think, is the wrong angle. Go after his policy proposals. Look for other candidates that might be able to challenge him on the left and the right.
Well, let's do that then, because he's coming to this country, we read this morning, in February.
Yeah, I mean, apparently he's going to be here in February. There is, down in Battersea on the South Bank, a huge new American embassy that's being built. It's nearing completion. So the story is that he comes to London in February to open that and perhaps go to 10 Downing Street. Not a full state visit, but a working visit. And
Can I ask you something about this? Because we've had these, I would say, actually disgraceful tweets from him this week, retweeting Britain First, which is a fascist, racist organisation. He retweeted Free Britain.
OK, let's just get this right, shall we? There are 43.6 million people that follow Donald Trump. Donald Trump follows 45 people. One of those is Ann Coulter, right-wing American commentator. Yeah. She retweeted these videos. He picked it up from her and retweeted it. And he wouldn't have an earthly clue who Britain First were.
That doesn't matter.
Were they in good taste?
Stupid.
Well, he's not that stupid. He's president of the USA,
well, if he doesn't
he's
know what
dominating.
He's retweeting.
Of course he doesn't. Of course he doesn't research
that means
everything.
He is stupid.
All right, no. You're dealing with a very different president here.
I'm asking a slightly different question, if I may. Was that not a disgraceful thing to do? Those tweets, were they not themselves disgraceful? They're stirring up hatred between people in this country. They're fake news. They should not have been retweeted by the President of the United States.
Was the story about ISIS throwing people off buildings fake news? No, it wasn't. It was true.
It happened in Egypt.
Do I think, Andrew, those tweets were in good taste? Not particularly. No, I don't. But the point is
You're going to defend him. You're always going to defend him.
The level of outrage from the liberal elite in this country is out of all proportion
can I just say,
with what...
you can't actually.
With what happened here.
I can.
And every single time, I haven't finished yet. I haven't finished yet. And the idea that should lead to half the Labour Party saying he shouldn't be allowed to come to our country, frankly, is ridiculous. And I think is viewed by the public as being ridiculous.
Aisha,
Donald Trump is a racist, he's misogynistic, and he's Islamophobic. He peddles in stirring up hate and division. Now, that is something that you might agree with, but that is not what British values are in this country. And just remember...
You're out of touch.
As Jo Cox lay there dying,
you're out of touch.
The scumbag who executed her shouted out the words, Britain First. So the idea that you defend Donald Trump...
Do you actually think the President knows who Britain First are?
If he doesn't know
he does by now, I would have thought.
First is, he is not fit to hold that office.
I agree with Aisha completely in sentiment. I'm ashamed that the President goes about living his life in this manner. And we've seen it for a long time. He was attacking Mexicans as rapists and murderers before he was even elected. So this is nothing new, and it's deeply frustrating. We have to live in reality, and politicians can't sever ties with Donald Trump. I think a working visit is in order. I also don't think that people should be banned from coming to the UK because of unsavory views that they hold, as unsavory as they may be. But I think we, the public, have every right to protest this.
I mean, I slightly disagree.
That is the right thing to do.
You said that Aisha was out of touch. When you see what happened in Charlottesville, for instance, and all those people making fascist salutes, and you hear some of the things being said from the Trump administration and that Steve Bannon thing, do you not think perhaps you are getting too close to a dark kind of politics?
Do you know something? I think I believe I've done more than anybody in this country to stop the rise of the far right in Britain. I did it by taking away those people who were going out and voting BNP and holding their nose. So when it comes to dealing with the far right, I've got a very good track record. Of course, I would condemn. Okay. Of course, I would condemn the extremists in Charlottesville, but the extremists on both sides, and it's very important that we don't get stuck.
Nigel,
look,
you've done more
there
to
is much,
stir up.
There are people
enough.
There are people out there on the left in this country who use violence to pursue their means. There's bad on both sides. It's important to recognise that. Very important.
I don't think we're going to get a calm consensus on this, I suspect. We're therefore going to go to a completely different story, which